Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cybersecurity and Cloud podcast. We are almost at the end of the season 2 and super excited about the live that's gonna conclude the series 2. If you haven't checked it out, it's on LinkedIn, it's gonna be on social, and we're gonna have not one, not two, not three podcasts, but 4 podcasts around the world: US, Europe, and Australia, all coming together to celebrate the end of season 2. And soon after, we're gonna start rocking up effectively season 3, and we're gonna get prepared for it. But today, I wanna welcome back Karla, an old friend and the ex-founder of BeecherMadden, that is a recruitment firm here in the UK that expanded in the US. And Karla had a little bit of a growth period from recruitment founder and into specific cyber, into more right now the threat intelligence. And on that aspect, we actually focus on the particular supply chain attack that affected a lot of people. There was a Solarwind attack, and how effectively seeing that attack into big organizations like Microsoft that likely released CodeQL identifier for the Solarwind signature. And we explore a little bit how the supply chain and how supply chain management could help identifying this problem. And then, of course, we're going to close on the involvement of Karla in all the cybersecurity industry and the good and positive aspect of a more inclusive world. It was a super exciting conversation. I really hope you enjoy. Stay safe and make sure your suppliers are safe. This is Francesco, your host, and I really hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Enjoy!
Welcome to the Cybersecurity and Cloud podcast, the podcast where we learn from cybersecurity experts how to stay safe, private, and secure on the cloud and in code. CSCP is hosted by Francesco Cipollone, your cybersecurity friend with a passion for all things cyber and sharing stories of other professionals with you. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome back to the Cybersecurity and Cloud podcast. Today, we have the absolute pleasure to have Karla Reffold on the show, and we're actually going to have the chance to cover one of my favorite topics, that is cyber skill shortage and cybersecurity, but most importantly, the supply chain issue and what we saw in recent time with the recent challenge on the supply chain, specifically with SolarWind. But without further ado, let me introduce Karla Reffold. So Karla is the CEO of Orpheus Security. And Karla, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background? How did you end up from the recruitment space into more the CEO and into the more the threat feed and threat intelligence?
Sure. Well, I think most people know me as being part of BeecherMadden, and I was one of the founders of BeecherMadden about 10 years ago now. And BeecherMadden grew from when we started, and I sold the business in 2017, stayed with the company that acquired us to do a little bit more work with them internationally, eventually moving to America. And really, I haven't been a recruiter for quite some time. I think I've made 2 placements in 5 years. I probably don't think I would have kept myself on in the business. So really, I'm a business leader. That's my experience: growing, scaling, selling businesses. So it made me quite a nice fit for Orpheus, who are in the cyber threat intelligence and third-party risk management space, and have some big growth plans this year. So I've come on board there to really look at how they can grow as a business internally, and also their sort of positioning externally as well.
Fantastic. And how do you see, well, actually, before we dive in, because it's a very keen subject, so I'm keen to dive in, but we have a tradition on the podcast that we want to give the audience a very quick cybersecurity advice on either personal or any kind of topic that you want. Very quick security advice.
So many. I would say, I know I get asked a lot about getting into cyber, and I would say to find the area that really interests you, because cyber is actually a very broad topic. So it might be threat intelligence, might be cloud security, but find your niche and then really focus on that. That's my quick advice.
No, that's fantastic. And I think it's really important because you can get distracted really, really easy about the 400 things that you can do. No, that's
Yeah.
great. And so in the supply chain challenge and in the whole threat intelligence, it's been of recent like a super focused topic because we had the recent breach of SolarWind that then had a cascade and a chain effect on a lot of other suppliers. We saw Microsoft in there. We saw a lot of other big names, and it got scary very, very quickly. And we've seen a lot of even government agencies getting and actioning on that news very, very quickly. So what are you guys doing, and what are your thoughts about that, and why are we getting it so wrong from a cyber perspective?
I think the SolarWinds breach, I think that I don't think there's anyone out there that's really claiming they could stop it. I don't think anybody could. I think that's a really useful thing for the industry, right? To be able to say, look, we're not infallible. There will be risks. We just have to decide as a business how much risk we want to accept. But I think the other great thing to come out of it is that supply chain piece. I think it's really highlighted to a broader audience how important the supply chain is within your cybersecurity. And I think there's been, there's teams within, particularly financial services, who've been pushed by their regulators for a little while, and that's increasing. But I think we're really starting to see an understanding of that, and an understanding that we need to know who's in our supply chain and know what risks they have. And we're definitely seeing a move away from that, annual questionnaire where we just take what you say as gospel and that's enough. We did our bit. What more could we do? We're definitely seeing a move away from that, and I think the SolarWinds breach is only going to make that easier for people to kind of get the attention of the board to be able to say, well, look, this is how it happens.
So it's actually happened, and now it becomes a reality rather than that scary monger threat and the scale of that. If you want to attack, because SolarWind has been in the business for a long time and built a lot of dependencies, has really showed that it's something to take seriously. But if we want to take an aspect, so from a cyber perspective, we always know that we are connected by other suppliers. We know that something might happen. It's not the first time actually something like this has happened. But from a legal and business perspective, from the business aspect perspective, how do you see that risk, and how do you see that maybe from a legal perspective? How do we tackle that when we negotiate, for example, a contract with a supplier, rather than the traditional checklist and checkbox security by checkbox exercise?
Well, I think we look to, what are some of the regulators saying? And they're saying, you need to have the contracts in place that make security a part of that. You need to have ways in your contract to break those contracts if you need to, if the security requirements aren't being met. So we can see them already saying this is something you need to do. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is kind of this move to actually, you need to monitor and you need to be involved with your suppliers. Actually, if we can help our suppliers, we can improve the whole security system as a whole, and it needs to move in that direction, and that's certainly what we're helping companies do. And I think one of the critical things is looking at not just not what gaps do they have, but what's actually the threat to those companies as well. Let's combine the two and kind of take a really measured approach to it. And what's the impact to the company? That's the bit that we at Orpheus can't do, but companies need to do. You really need to understand who's a critical supplier, rather than sort of applying the same controls to everybody, which I think most large companies are mature enough that they're doing that. But it's those three kind of things coming together that are really important.
Like, damn it, I still need to do the legwork of knowing my business.
Yeah, and
If
that's the big
only,
challenge.
if only there was the magic one to say, please to tell me everything that I need to know about my business, where my data is, and who I'm actually doing business with, because I can't be bothered.
Yeah, and we hear that often, like from big companies. It's hard, right? It's hard to know where all your data is, who are all your suppliers. People have got things that they're signing up to and things that they want to use every day, probably more so in the last 12 months. So it is hard to understand exactly where all your risks are if you're a large organization.
Yeah, but I've seen the two opposite side of it. I've seen organizations just wrapping themselves up in governance against governance and control of the controller of the controller, to actually ensure their process rather than rationalizing the process. And they can hold completely innovation and hold completely a company just into bureaucracy. So if you want, how do we balance between wanting to control their risk and trying to prevent their risk, and the completely different aspect on saying, well, we assume breach, we assume that everybody's malicious, and where do we go in this broad spectrum of things, in your opinion?
I think one of the really key things is the soft skills of your security team, because it's then going to come down to your relationships, right?
Soft skill
Are you
what? Soft what? Security and soft skill, do they really match?
yeah, the good ones match. But are you the person that does have all these controls that are enforcing, and actually people are looking for ways to get around you because you're just making life difficult? Or are you somebody that they feel they can sort of work with? And I think that really comes down to relationships rather than, unfortunately, policies and process.
Yes, because they're stale, and ultimately, that's a very important topic, because as security people, we're broadening our spectrum. So we used to be the guys in the server room together with the server guys just saying no, and now we just turn completely into these business enabled people. And I think that tide shifted when the CISO level became a board reporting role, and it gave finally the authority to security to be there, but also required a step up of security people on, well, now you have a business impact or a business exposure. You need to talk business to business. And I think as an industry, we still struggle to do that. We tend to go in the rabbit hole of talking risk, or not talking enough risk, but talking about problems and not contextualizing the problem into the business sense, and only being focused on, well, security is a problem and you need to fix it, not just how much risk it adds and how much the asset that we're trying to protect actually is important, because that's giving that contextualization that is absolutely key for business, but we struggle to do.
Yeah, and most of the training programs or the routes into cyber, they don't really cover those things, and that's where actually people that maybe sometimes pivot into cyber have a really good benefit, because they have some of those different skills, or they're used to some of those conversations. But we don't really talk about that enough, especially sort of as you're coming up in security. We talk to people, and I see loads of conversations, I'm sure everyone does, on social media about, which certs will I do and how do I get my first job? And we're not like really talking about, well, what skills do I need? What soft skills do I need? And how can I go get those? Maybe that's a different way in.
I think we need to, I agree with you, I absolutely agree with you. And I think as an industry, we need to mature and stop. Maybe, well, there are certain jobs that are cool in cybersecurity, like the red team versus the blue team versus the purple team. So the pen testing versus the defenders. And the more technical roles, sometimes they can be more attractive. I think we need to just demystify the aspect that other roles like architect or GRC people, risk and compliance people, are as critical as other roles, because sometimes they suffer as a stigma. And that's why we have like 2000 of security certification and not a lot of stress on business related certification that thinks business or security as a whole, as a more holistic view. And maybe that's also why we have a problem on scaling up CISO. So why CISO, when they reach to a point, they either super technical or non-technical at all, and they kind of lie in this challenge of either not being able to talk to the technical people or not being able to talk to the business. So do we create more coaching and executive um, kind of training or technical certification, but open to everybody?
Well, maybe, and it's not just restricted to security either. How many times have you talked about an accountant that is boring and only gets numbers, like, and doesn't know how to talk to people? Like, we kind of apply these stereotypes to all sorts of roles within the business. HR is seen as the blockers that you don't want to go tell anything to because you're going to get in trouble. Like, they're not all true for every single person in those roles, but like every department has that. And that's why I think you see, when you look at like leadership roles in large businesses, they often have really weird routes into those roles. They've done different roles in, maybe in legal in different countries quite often. Like they've moved around, and I think that gets underestimated in business as a whole. So yeah, I think people should see the value maybe in taking experiences in different departments or learning from other areas. And there's coaching courses and things like that for all of these professions. Like cyber people can go join them too.
So should we push cyber people into finance or cyber people into HR and see what happens?
I forget which business it was, but there was one business I was familiar with a long time ago, and they required all of their execs to have spent at least 6 months working in the HR department to get an understanding of that. And I think, I don't know, I've interviewed a lot of CISOs, and a lot of them really like reporting to the CFO because they say how, that gives them that understanding of how to quantify risk in a way that then the business is familiar with. So maybe.
Yeah, no, I talked to at least 2 CISOs that had the same exact opinion. Said initially we were completely scared and dreadful of like, yeah, we don't want to report to a CFO. It's only going to be talking about money. But that helped them contextualize and create and focus more on the risk and financial aspects. So gains versus benefit versus risk, rather than just purely of there is a security problem, let's fix it, without that contextualization. So I think it's key. But pivoting back maybe on the supply chain problem, I have a story to tell that it's so funny that happened. I can't disclose to who, but fundamentally somebody that was maintaining, or a system that was or a supplier that was maintaining air conditioning system got breached. And nobody ever thought that they had a route to the data center for no reason whatsoever. And they managed, from that company that was breached, they managed to get all the way to the data center of the other company. And then the company asks, why do somebody in an air conditioning system need to have SSH access or completely flat access to the data center? And the answer was, because they asked. And hence we granted.
I didn't realize it was that easy.
Yeah. Stop being a hacker, stop being a red team, becomes a supplier. All your wishes shall be granted. But on that subject, do you have some funny story or some insightful story that you can share, that you're able to share about some of this stuff? Or
I think there's lots that we're all familiar with as an industry, right? The fish tank in the casino that's been hacked, and the light bulb.
I've used that plenty of times.
I'm starting to wonder if they're real, or are these like cyber urban legends. But I think we all have those stories, and I think they do help get people's attention, right?
They're real.
But that's probably not your main risk. Like, how likely is that? Like, okay, well, we'll just make sure our fish tanks aren't connected to the internet and we're safe. Like, that's not what you really need to be thinking about.
Or our bikes. Yeah. Joe Biden's pelotons apparently struck a big no-no in the White House.
Yeah, we're going to be listening to Joe Biden on his Peloton if we don't cut out his microphone. So
please segment your bikes from your main network.
Yeah. And I think we've heard a lot about this year, right? With people being at home, and how do our personal networks impact our work networks? Like, that's the bigger risk, really. And most people, like, being honest, even me, sort of switch off a little bit. Like, I don't want to go secure my personal internet. Like, can't someone take care of that for me? And I think that could be really interesting, where we get to with that, if we continue to work from home for a period of time, how are companies really going to look at managing that risk? How much security do they want, or should they be entitled to in a person's home? That's something to think about for the future, particularly maybe at the exec level. Should you have a private space? Should that space be lockable? Like, should you have your own network that the company owns in your home? That's something that is really going to last for us for the long term.
This episode is brought to you by the generosity of AppSec Phoenix Ltd. AppSec helps startups and enterprises solve complex software security problems by using smart data aggregation and complex machine learning software. Discover how AppSec Phoenix helps CISO and developers remove friction and maximize the use of DevSecOps professionals at www.appsecphoenix.com. AppSec Phoenix is the new and smart dev-first way to manage your software vulnerability. Follow the tag #AppSecSmart.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, because right now it is becoming the norm of being completely distributed. So as we realize, also the bad actor will realize that, well, why do I need to attack the HQ when I can attack a house that is absolutely reachable from outside the home, and maybe it has a weak connection, or maybe, I can plug something acting as, I don't know, a gardener or something, or a maiden and stuff like that, because it opens new scenarios. And I'm curious to see if in threat modeling scenarios, or in attack possible scenario, we see somebody dressed up as a maiden and, and showing up at an executive house with a small Raspberry Pi. And I'm not giving anybody ideas.
I started my career working with physical security and business continuity crisis management people, and they would go visit exec houses. They would, look at, do you keep your hose outside and someone can potentially use that to flood your house and get access to you? So they were looking at those risks, and that was 10 plus years ago. Now the risks we've probably forgotten about that because everything's gone online, but maybe
Sure.
we probably need to be thinking, and I know a lot of people in cyber do, but not all, we do need to bridge that physical security and that cyber security element, maybe more now than ever.
Yeah, no, I agree. But then there is how much do we invade the privacy of the home? So I was discussing one of the CISO, because there were a couple of topics of, you're in a home that is shared, and you have your kids doing whatever they want on their laptops, and you never know if it gets compromised, and ultimately is in the same network as you're working, and it could be used as an attack vector or somebody targeting. So away from spear phishing into maybe the easier people. So do we also train the son or daughter of an executive into cybersecurity awareness training as well, because they become part of the household now?
There are a couple of companies that do that as well. There are security awareness tools, and they give that to employees and their families. I forget the stats, but I think there's stats that, if you've got good security awareness and hygiene in your personal life, you bring that into your business life. So, which makes a lot of sense. So maybe that's a solution that's a little easier to apply to a general workforce. But for execs, why can't you rent them a space? Why can't you make sure they have a secure space? Maybe put in there, a totally different network in their home. If you think their information is that valuable, and then, maybe there's some sort of compensation balance there. But, if that really is a risk you're worried about, then you can probably sort of do something about that doesn't necessarily involve changing the way their family operates.
Yeah, and a lot of company right now, and hopefully in the future, is going to save a lot of office space. So you can potentially delegate something like that to an executive and say, get a bigger house. Potentially, as an executive, you won't need a bigger house because you have a space that you can use as an office. But shipping a bunch of, an access point and an additional internet line as a backup, you can afford it as a company, at least for the critical stuff, and at least do that exercise. But I think all these space is new for us and for a lot of company. I think we saw in the beginning of COVID, and everybody has talked it to the death about where do they connect and how do we reapply zero trust on the endpoint. So I'm not going to even touch that. But I think we shifted the mindset from, okay, that was just a short period of time, or maybe this is going to stay for a little while, or maybe this is going to be the norm for a lot of company. What do you think?
Yeah.
Prediction.
I think we're going to see a hybrid model that probably gravitates to more in-office time than we originally thought. That's, I think we will miss that human connection, and I think easy to keep people involved when you're all remote, but it's much harder when some people are at home and some people are in the office. So that's my prediction. And I think we have to look, like, sort of taking it back to the security, we kind of have to look at, what is the threat? Like, all of these things are possible, but how many of them are really like happening on scale, when actually, you've got a dozen critical unpatched vulnerabilities on your system that maybe are a bigger risk than, where your exec is and where he's leaving his data, and how he's accessing things, or she. So I think that's something to keep in mind, like, where is the risk really, rather than the possible.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree, and it will be interesting to see the evolution in risk management and the evolution in threat modeling on what people consider risky. And in that space, do you see how do you see the maturity of the organization in risk management and risk assessment rather than risk management, internally and externally?
I think organizations understand risk, right? Like, risk, and it's a pretty key factor of being in business. And I think the evolution is in how we in cyber communicate that risk, and starting to have a conversation around what levels of risk are acceptable. And I think that's where we as an industry are probably moving, right? I think we're getting there. And that's really where I think it's going. And I think it's that understanding of, not just what threats are possible, but what threats are really facing you as an organization, and then what vulnerabilities you have, and then how you communicate that level of risk to a business.
Yeah, the contextualization is key, and understanding which asset do you protect and how critical they are, or how important they are, because there'll be different level of criticality. But it goes back to the problem of understanding your business up to a certain degree, understanding where your data is and understanding where your application are. And I have to admit, we're not really good at that. I haven't seen one organization that is really good at defining even how many assets do they have. In the cloud, maybe is becoming easier. So doing enumeration in the cloud, having a really good understanding of how many assets do you have, where with a little bit of effort is getting better. So do you think that's going to be critical, or do you think there will be other element to be critical in the risk assessment of your position and your risk exposure?
I think, like, we're gonna kind of get there on working out what is where, right? Like, but it's really hard. I totally get it. I probably started, thinking about this a few years ago, thinking like, why can't you patch everything? Why don't you know where your stuff is? Surely this is really obvious. And then the more people I've met and spoken to, particularly in large organizations, I really get the scope of this problem. You often have old legacy systems, and you have so many people, so many geographies, departments. It is hard to work out where that is, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes somebody being totally focused on that, maybe even a team totally focused on that, to work that out, and to build those relationships with the business as things change, as they add in things, and and stop using things. Understand how do they use them, so you understand how you can help them protect them. That's important.
So going away from the technical and back again in the people and relationship management.
You can't avoid them, right?
Well, we hope as a security people, sometimes we hope to avoid the human aspect, but unfortunately we can. And we're actually even more dragged into that because we're part of the business.
Yeah, I feel like as an industry, we talk about like people, process, technology, right? And I feel like over the years, I've seen that cycle kind of shift. I feel we're firmly in a people part of this cycle. Maybe we'll swing it back to technology at some point, but I do feel right now the industry is firmly on that people focus.
True, social engineering, phishing is again that convincing people. I haven't seen a cycle on process because nobody likes process. So I think we shift between technology and people. Process, whatever. It's boring.
We're seeing a lot around awareness, right? A lot of awareness roles, awareness companies focusing on, behaviors, and, we're certainly seeing investment going into those areas as well.
No, I agree. And governance and applying those things actually get you out of jail most of the time, because not applying certain things, actually it's illegal in certain regulation and in certain industries. So I think we need to look at the will. But I totally agree with you. Right now we are in the people phase.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. Anyway, we come close to the time, and we have another tradition on the podcast that we leave everybody with a warm and fuzzy feeling, with giving a positive message on, I don't know, the situation or cybersecurity. Generally speaking, cybersecurity, but considering we're in people aspect, I'll leave the decision to you, Karla.
Oh, warm and fuzzy. I don't know if I do that. Anyone that knows me will say I'm going to struggle here. I think warm and fuzzy is what I've really liked this year, is how, like, what I've seen is we've really come together as a community. I love seeing posts with people about their kids. I love how kids and pets jump into Zoom meetings, and it's really highlighted that, you know, we're people as well as employees, and that is something I really hope we carry into the future, as kind of things maybe start going back to normal.
Here you go. Stay human, stay real, and to maintain
Yeah.
that. Maybe bringing kids and pets in the office. Don't know how much is applicable, but you know, we're modern, so who knows?
I've done it before. It doesn't work out that well, to be honest.
But until Zoom, it's fine, and until you have tape where you can tape kids and and your cat on the wall, that's fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, Karla, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts on risk and third-party risk management. And very good luck with your new adventure. And I hope I'm going to see you in a little bit of time, and you can share maybe horror story or good news and good stories about third-party supply risk management. Karla, an absolute pleasure. And everybody, thank you so much for coming and listening to the Cloud Security Podcast. Thank you, Karla.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcast and post it on social media tagging Cybersecurity Cloud Podcast for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Discover other episodes at www.cybersecuritypodcast.com.